Welcome to the Love, Sex, and Leadership podcast, where you can discover simple tantric teachings to embody your true power, awaken your soul's wisdom, and live an inspired life as a natural, intuitive, and heart-centered leader. So, welcome everyone to another conversation on love, sex, and leadership. My name is Aaron Kleinerman, and very happy to have a friend, a brother, Om Rupani,
Hello.
who does a lot of teaching with a dear friend of mine, Laurie Handlers, and I've known for quite a few years. We're both just in a similar men's summit, bringing a lot of this work out into the world, helping brothers out in the world wake the fuck up, essentially. And today we'll be discussing igniting the erotic life. And I know Om does a lot of work in BDSM and really helping people in that igniting of erotic life. And yeah, super grateful to have you here. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So yeah, let's just dive right in. You know, we don't know each other too well, but we've seen each other through the years. I think the first question I have is, you know, one of the things I like to talk about on this podcast is this merging of like healthy sexual leadership, you know, and it takes a certain amount of could say kahunas to bring in um sexuality components, to bring in BDSM, and to really like stand strong. And I've seen you through a number of years, really the posts and the things that you bring out into the community have a very, you know, they have a strong edge to it. And I love that. I love the place to where you communicate from. It really speaks to me very, very clearly. And I'd love to just hear like a little bit of your journey, like what's got you to the place of wanting to lead and direct and support people, especially on this route of BDSM.
I would say I would have to give the credit to the teachers and the communities that I first reached out to learn for my own benefit and for my own personal relationship. And this journey probably started, I don't know, in 2005, 6 for me. And actually, one of my first teachers was Lori.
Mm,
Lori Handlers. I very much, she was my first teacher, my first mentor in Tantra. Um, Other wonderful teachers at that time are basically, it's like once you start exploring, basically, yeah, workshop junkies, happy to say so in a good way. Like, really, like what else is out there? Because, we don't learn this stuff at school. There aren't like institutions of learning that you can go join. There's not even like it's not like you can go join the art students league so I can study art and drawing for 3 years with these fine people. It's like you have to find the teachers and take a evening class and take a weekend class, gather information, the teachers you like, go back and learn more from them.
mm,
So in the beginning days, it was that process, which I'm sure pretty much everybody in our community has followed. It was Laurie's work. I absolutely adore Barbara Carreras.
mm-hmm,
So took as many classes with her. And then I found One Taste and
mm-hmm,
learned the
mm-hmm,
oming and stroking there and got tremendous amount from One Taste. And then
mm,
then slowly discovered BDSM.
mm,
And Barbara Carreras was actually one of the wonderful teachers who firmly is planted both in Tantra and BDSM. So started taking classes from her, from the other teachers she was often co-teaching with. Went to a wonderful event called Dark Odyssey, which is still going on,
mm,
which I've been to several times before. I haven't been there in a few years, but then I'm going now in January. I'm very excited
mm.
to be revisiting. It's a great meeting ground for people who practice BDSM and who have so much experience, and it's a great place to learn. So it's kind of self-taught desire. Started off by wanting to improve my own life. I've been in a very long-term relationship and we are in a very happy place right now, but we've been through our ups and downs. And certainly as often happens in long-term relationship, the fire and the eros, it did seem to dwindle off over time.
Mhm,
And then it's
mhm,
like we love our connection. We want to keep doing this. How can we ignite our eros a little bit more? And I think it's
mm,
still an ongoing challenge in long-term relationships. So all the extra help we can get, I think it's great because I think the partnership and domesticity is not a friend of Eros and partnership. So it's a
Mhm.
constant journey to say, well, how can we keep bringing the good in? And then, so it was not like I had any kind of a mission that I'm going to be talking about Eros or even teaching it. Just started off as a student
Mm.
for a long time. And then, like, little by little, like, turning it around and like offering evening classes and hour-long classes. And the teaching part kind of grew from there. It really wasn't planned out or anything.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. So it's like now you know enough that maybe there are other people who can learn from you. So it happened in that kind of a transition.
Mm.
And as far as, truth be told, even this whatever persona I may have as being however you want to describe it, have a bit of a none of this is like planned or intentional. From where I'm coming from, the best I can do is share what I know to be correct
Mm. Mhm.
and share it plainly. So I don't think I'm ever speaking or writing for effect or to be chargy or to be controversial. I'm like, this is the best I see.
Mm.
And I think sometimes my delivery can use a little smoothing out, and I'm always working on that. But I don't think any material or any ideas that I'm sharing, I'm trying to be controversial. I'm like, this is the best I know. This is the best I see so far. This is the best
Mhm.
I can share with you today.
Mhm. Yeah, beautiful. There's a couple things you're saying there that I'd love to hear further on. And one of the things I see, especially in this field, is more and more people taking weekends and then beginning to teach. And I love the evolution of kind of that journey from student to teacher. I had
Yeah,
many years where I was constantly just taking the next workshop, and then I remember I had a partner a long time ago that said, you don't need to take more, like you can start showing up as a teacher. And I remember
yeah.
just feeling this place of, wow, okay, there's a permission field. And yeah, I'd love to hear some of like the both the challenges as well as the celebrations in that journey from you, from the student that's learning and learning to really like,
Yeah.
when was the point when okay, I'm ready to actually start delivering here.
Just tiny, tiny steps, doing like a 1 hour evening class many times in the beginning, even just doing it for free. And I
Hmm.
think I'm very grateful to One Taste and Nicole Dodone for that, that in that environment, I was given opportunity to hold like evening gatherings in
Hmm.
conjunction with other people. So that was like there was a first step to like step into some kind of a holding the room space.
Hmm.
Not even like code teaching, but they were like evening gatherings, and you would kind of lead the group, the conversation. So, and from there, really responding to see, do I have anything to contribute? So
Hmm.
it was really very much a feedback loop that if other people think what I'm saying and contributing is useful to them, then going on that. And then if other people keep coming to me and saying, can you present a little bit to at our event? Can you do a little presentation? So it was not like, again, not like I'm sitting in a room deciding I'm going to do this. It's
Hmm.
really responding to appetite, responding to, we liked what you said. Can you come present at our thing?
Hmm.
So it was
Beautiful.
really responding to other people calling me out to teach. It
Hmm.
wasn't really by my own initiative. If anything, I was like quite shy about. I'm
Hmm.
truly an introvert. I'm not never had any dreams about being in front of people
Hmm.
originally. Not really been my temperament. I really had to step into it.
And was that challenging to kind of move
It
from
was
the
challenging. I mean, we both know and love Lori Handlers. She has wonderful, wonderful and embarrassing stories she loves to tell about me when we first met. But they're true. I remember when I was in Lori's class, this was like 2000, maybe 7, 8. And this goes back all the way to my college days. I would know because the few friends I had, they would often complain, "Oh, you're mumbling. We can't hear you." We were sitting like across the dining table from me, and they're like, "We can't hear you. You're mumbling again."
Hmm.
So there
Hmm.
was there wasn't any desire to hold the room or project or express. If anything, I was like, I'm happy to be the quiet person at the table.
Mm,
And
mhm,
then it was teachers like Lori is like, uh, first of all, you're holding yourself back. She would probably describe it as a blockage in the fifth chakra.
mm,
And if
mhm,
you want to put me on the couch, uh, yeah, the family I grew up in, my opinion was not wanted.
mm, mhm,
So
mhm,
it was like you grew up in an environment where like you didn't express your desires or opinions. It really wasn't the kind of place where that was welcomed,
mm,
right? So probably as a result of that is like wasn't I wasn't particularly expressive or wanting to share my opinion. I'm like I'm happy to just sit here back here and listen. And then
mhm,
it was wonderful uh mentors like Lori who kind of and another wonderful woman you met, I think at Lori's wedding, Michelle Younger,
mhm,
who
mhm,
used to teach
mhm,
with Lori, who is a wonderful, wonderful soul and a very big energy. And they basically beat that silence and kind of false modesty out of me, saying, "You're not really fully expressed," as you would imagine Lori doing to people when people are
of
holding
course,
themselves back. So
of
I'm
course.
extremely grateful to having encountered these wonderful people. And if it weren't for their mentorship, their push, their reflection of what was possible in me, their reflection of where I was not expressed, this arc would not have been possible. So I feel if we believe our journeys are guided, they feel I was shoved in front of these people so they could mentor me and beat me and beat this other crap out of me so I could be more expressed and then if I had something worthwhile to share, to not hide against some kind of a false modesty. They're like, oh no, I don't have anything to do. Like, no, you do. You
Mhm,
have something
mhm,
to share. So when you're withholding that, you're not doing yourself any favor, and there might be people you might be able to contribute to.
mhm, mhm. So what I really hear in you sharing is like having good mentors that don't take the
Absolutely,
bullshit and really like
absolutely.
call you
Yeah,
out
very
to
much,
your better self. Yeah,
very much.
beautiful. You know,
Yeah,
I can relate to that journey a lot. There's been a lot of amazing mentors in my journey through the years.
yeah. Really grateful to them, and yeah, I wouldn't be the man I am without their guidance, their loving prodding forward.
Mm, mhm, mhm. And you know, I'd love to hear you mentioned earlier and two things. First, I'd say, you know, you teach a lot in the realms of BDSM, and you know, I'm more kind of in the tantra side, little
Yeah,
flavors.
yeah,
And what would you say is the most like misunderstood concept around BDSM for someone who's just listening and like, hey, I've
yeah,
heard about this. I want
yeah.
to explore it, but I've heard so many different things. So, what's the most misunderstood concept that you feel that kind of pushes people away from that world?
Um, I think maybe there are two big ones. One one would be that these people are weird, that all BDSM play is some kind of a compensation, that you have some kind of an imbalance
Mm,
in your psyche. Something happened to you as a kid, maybe you were punished as a kid, maybe you were experienced violence as a kid, and somehow things have gotten screwy in your head, and BDSM play is kind of your compensation for the weirdness that has happened to you.
hmm hmm
I hear this prejudice like weird people do this, damaged people do this.
mm, mm,
And I may have held the same prejudice before I was introduced to BDSM. I'm like, why would people get off on this? There
hmm
must be
hmm
something different and off about them.
mm,
And so I think this is still a commonly held prejudice, which I think is dissipating
hmm
in
hmm
more recent years. And
mm,
after practicing and seeing the practitioners, I've really come out on the complete opposite end of this particular prejudice, which is, who are the people who have the hardest time practicing BDSM?
mm,
People who actually have trauma in their childhood.
hmm hmm
Most people who practice BDSM, they actually, I have never, they it's like, yes, of course, people have stuff in their background and childhood, but this entire theory that this is some kind of a compensatory activity,
mm,
it really doesn't hold water. I think it's simply factually and scientifically incorrect.
hmm
Most
Do you,
people, I don't think kink is for kinky people. I think kink is for everybody, whatever we consider kink to be. I think the BDSM realm has so much to offer that pretty much everyone can benefit from some aspect of it. I think that's one negative prejudice.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. It's I've learned a lot. I mean, I've kind of journeyed more into the realms of working with rope and shibari, especially coming from my maritime kind of sailing
Yeah,
background.
wonderful.
The piece I do see is that and I'm curious your thoughts, is that I find that a lot of people that have had more intense sexual trauma, there's like a part of them that's often drawn to this world and aren't always consciously aware of why. And sometimes I think maybe they're, consciously replaying some of the traumatic things from their
Yeah.
past. And curious your take on that, because that's where I do sometimes see people almost looping and not moving forward, or where's that line between, okay, I'm going to play out the scene and continue to be there, and where's that line where yet they actually can heal that thing that they're drawn to.
So again, I'm not a trained psychologist. I'm gonna give you my opinion as a layperson, as an observer,
Of course.
my observation from the field. So whatever has happened to in our childhood, whatever our attachment patterns are, whatever abandonment issues are, they are playing out in our relationship for all people.
Hmm.
Nothing specific about people who do kink. You
Hmm.
never have to do any kink, and you think your issues with your mother and father don't end up in your romantic relationships? You think if you were physically abused, that doesn't end up in your non-kink romantic relationship? Of
Mm,
course it
mhm,
does.
mhm,
So
mhm.
to say our childhood ends up in our romantic relationship, I'm like, yeah, across the
Mm,
board for
mhm, mhm,
everybody.
mhm,
Yeah, your parents got divorced at a certain age, that ends up. Your father was an alcoholic, that ends up in your romantic relationship. Your father and mother used to throw things at each other, that ends up in your romantic relationship. You used to be punished by your father after you used to get drunk, that ends up in your romantic relationship. I
mm,
don't think it has
mhm,
anything to do with
mhm,
whether you do BDSM or not.
mm.
So let's acknowledge that first. They're like, there's nothing. Come on, that's
Absolutely.
universal. And
Yeah, yeah.
if you are exploring that specifically in the BDSM realm, what I have observed is those people are actually a notch higher in their awareness
Mm,
about what
mhm.
they're doing and what they're recreating. Rest of the world is just running on autopilot till a therapist sits them down and says, "This is the 10th alcoholic you're dating. Can we talk about your alcoholic father, please?" I mean, it's
Mhm.
funny, but it's not really
That's
exaggeration,
for sure, for sure.
right? Like every woman, I have friends who are, I have therapist friends who are like this. Every woman you have dated has turned out to be either borderline or completely unstable or fucking three men on the side.
Mhm.
How is it possible you're only attracted to these women? Can we talk about how withholding or withdrawn your mother used to be?
Mm, mm,
And the fact that if a woman actually simply gives you her love, you don't even consider that love.
mm,
That if you
mm,
don't have to, if you don't have to be fighting with your claws to get a woman's love, you don't actually consider it romance. Where did this pattern come from?
mm,
This is
mm,
how our psyches are built. This got nothing specifically to do with going into BDSM scene play,
mm, mhm,
right?
mhm,
But when people actually come into BDSM exploration and they're like, you know what, I want to deal with this thing within
mm,
scene space, that actually requires a slightly higher degree of awareness.
mhm,
It
mhm,
requires, this is in me, I want to play with it. If there's an understanding that I am bringing this to a Dom, I'm articulating it so I know what the hell I'm asking for. I'm exploring it within a controlled scene
mhm,
so I can
mhm,
actually play with these energies in my system.
mhm, mhm,
And oftentimes in BDSM, people have releases and catharsis in these areas bigger than sometimes they have on the therapist's couch.
mm,
So
mm,
when people say people who do BDSM are running on autopilot, I'm like, no, 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 no. Everybody else is running on autopilot.
mhm, mhm,
We are all running on autopilot till we either end up in the therapist's couch and say, "This is my 10th alcoholic, help me. I don't know how to get out of this."
mm,
So it can we do anything badly? Can people do BDSM badly? Absolutely. Can you do BDSM unconsciously? Absolutely. But
mhm,
I think if
mhm,
we try to make a correlation that people who do BDSM are just traumatized people running around like zombies doing things. I'm like, that's not what I see.
mm,
I
mm,
actually see a greater degree of self-awareness and sophistication in people who practice BDSM.
mm, mm. No, I love that. Thank you. Yeah, and I've noticed my own journey with it from being very misunderstood and not really getting it all, and then seeing a very similar reality in terms of the level of conscious communication that happens around sexuality that I wish was more in
Yes.
our everyday world. You know, what desires are, what fears are there, how are we going to create this so that we both feel safe
Yeah,
through the
we
situation?
have to communicate in a BDSM scene to create the scene. We have to be co-conspirators.
Mm,
So at least within the two people, you have to communicate what is it that you're trying to explore. You can't kind of do it on your own. You can't do it on the sly.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. So a little bit of a shifting gear, but also kind of connecting these dots. You know, you mentioned earlier, kind of keeping eros alive in relationship, and you know, I work with a lot of couples. I do a lot
Yeah,
of couples therapy and helping couples like keep eros alive in their marriage and
yeah.
bedroom, and not just becoming sexless marriages. And I'm curious, both in your own personal journey as well as professional, like what do you see that really, like, works for people to not have sexless marriages where you're falling asleep every night with your
Nothing
friends?
really works completely in long-term couples. And I'm speaking for myself. I
Mm,
think nature is against us in
mm,
long-term bonding with
mm,
Eros. I think nature is built for us to be drawn to new ass energy.
mm,
That is the blunt, honest truth. I think we can bring more eros, we can bring more mischief, we can bring more sexual skill, and we can try and keep the erotic flow going in long-term coupledom. But I actually think if we really, really want to be, if we really want to outdo nature, we actually have to be even smarter than that,
mm,
which is we actually need to incorporate new ass energy in long-term relationships to actually keep the eros going. It is an uphill battle. You can have truly great long-term relationship where people are loving each other, they're taking care of each other, they've got each other's back, they're truly there for each other. I think nature doesn't give a rat's ass about eros staying alive in long-term relationships.
mm,
They're like, stay alive, keep your children alive, keep your life going. You've already procreated. What the fuck do you need to fuck for anyway? You don't need to be hot for your wife. You don't need to be hot for your husband.
mm,
I really think there is nothing abnormal about it. We are
mm,
lamenting this thing like everything has gone awry and this is a mistake. And I actually don't think it's a mistake. I think if we want to bring Eros into long term relationship, that actually needs to be a hack on our part. We really
mm,
have to hack our systems to do that. And one of the funnest hacks you can bring in, especially if your bond is solid, is to actually bring in, outsource some of the Eros.
mhm, mhm,
I do this in my own life. I help other people do it. I'm like, really, you need to make erotic play more a banquet
mm,
and stop thinking that two people over 30 years are just supposed to remain hot for each other. And if there are, those are exceptions and God bless them. But I think the rest of the world saying this is the way it should be, there is no evidence of it.
mm, mm.
The man
Uh,
can be beautiful, the woman can be beautiful, the man can say, I fucking love my woman, look how hot she is. And yet that erotic energy is is simply not in favor.
mhm,
Nature doesn't favor that vibrancy in
mm,
long-term partnership and domesticity, especially if you have children together.
mm.
It's like other things take priority.
And so you feel like the kind of ideal of find a wife or husband and be married forever and never be with anyone else. It's just a
You can be absolutely fine. I absolutely believe in long, stable, secure relationships. I think we
mm,
absolutely need that. But
mhm,
erotic vibrancy has never been on the agenda in the human
mm,
species. Marriage
mm,
was never supposed to be about erotic vibrancy. It was supposed to be about procreation and domesticity and keeping the children alive.
Mm,
It
mhm,
was never about erotic expression. This is a very new criteria we have on long-term partnerships.
mm,
It was not really even sought after or
mhm.
something pursued. But it is
And
very important today. So it's like it has become a real problem because erotic expression has become much more important to us in our time. And now we are trying to balance, well, how can I have that erotic expression and have the long-term secure partnership, which people still want. And I think it's a healthy thing to
mhm,
want
mhm,
long-term secure partnerships.
mm,
But
mhm,
I think it's better to have the long-term secure partnership and then say, well, how do we add eros into it instead
mm,
of taking it for granted that it's just supposed to be there?
mm, mhm, mhm. So bring it in with clear communication and
Bring it with clear
transparency.
communication. If you are open to it, invite other people into it, have a community of people. It doesn't always have to be about doing everything with everybody, but in the community we are in, that can be vibrancy to having temple nights, to having play parties, to having BDSM events.
Mhm, mhm,
Bring the joy and the vibrancy into it, and keep things alive that way. To me, the best model I see in a long-term partnership is each person is interested in keeping their partner erotically satisfied. It doesn't mean they
mm,
do it all themselves,
mhm, mhm.
right? I don't know how much detail you want to go into it.
No, 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 I love it. One of the things that comes up for me is looking at, where we are as a culture today. And, sometimes there's a conversation of more of the tribal culture that we've kind of come from, where often, there would be a natural sharing of one woman with many men, and many women, men being
Yeah,
a variety of different women. And, I can see, of course, drawbacks and advantages to that, and how, it actually ends up being the tribe that raises a family, and rather
right.
these single dyad kind of, closed box places that people, try to raise family from.
I hear you, but I think if we really need to separate the conversation between erotic joy and expression and the raising
Mm,
of family and the family unit and the bonding, they
mhm,
both kind of need their own attention,
mm,
their own nourishment, their own structures,
mm,
right? So if you're talking about the village raising the child, people not raising children in a nuclear family, that's a whole other conversation.
mhm,
But if you're
mhm,
talking about two people who have a solid bond, who really love each other, who are completely good in their partnership, and then how do we add a little bit more erotic fun into their life? And I'm like, that requires creative solutions. Don't take for
mm,
granted that it should just be there. And don't think that if it's not there, something is wrong with your partnership.
mhm.
I think these
And
expectations are hurting people more than anything.
yeah, for sure. And where's the line? Because the other thing I see in people that, have a lot of erotic play and are often having many lovers, is that, you're saying that solid bond. And I agree. I agree. Like, having that solid bond that actually is a foundation that you can
Yeah,
move from. But what do you see is, like, of course, there's not an actual timeline, but I see some people going into polyamorous connections, like when their relationship isn't solid and they're trying to bring other people in, and actually just ends up making things messier. I see that a lot. And then they have this thought of actually, polyamory, or whatever you want to call it, non-ethical, or ethical non-monogamy is the right
yeah,
word. Um, like, that ends up being there, as rather than, let me deepen with one, let me just have more of a cornucopia of many,
yeah.
and not deal with the issues that are in the dyad with another. Curious your thoughts with that, because I see that a lot in this
I
field
would
too.
I would really separate relationship, bonding, emotional connection from erotic play.
Hmm.
Erotic play can be really, it can be like, tonight we're going out to dinner.
Mhm.
You're
Mhm.
not you're not wagering your relationship,
Mhm.
nor
Mhm.
are you giving up your own kitchen. You're like, today we are going to a play party. Today we are going to a dungeon.
Mhm.
Yeah, I am a dom. I handle a lot of women
Mhm.
at events, at parties. even I, when I find a dom, when I have a bond with a man and I know he's a good dom, I'm like, handle my woman.
Mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I want her to have a scene with you.
mm-hmm.
I want to
Beautiful.
bring that richness. And this and that offer is a 1 hour, 2 hour erotic event. It's a scene. It is not destroying our connection. The other person is not moving in. This is not polyamory.
Yep, yep.
This is adding erotic nourishment and play and fun. Play is the correct word for it.
Mm-hmm,
Truly, I really don't want to diminish or belittle erotic connection, but it is not fundamentally that different than going to a dance with your woman and saying, handing your woman off to have a dance with another man. You can
mm-hmm,
have your boundaries, you don't have to do everything. And
mm-hmm,
yet, there is something lovely like dance with other people, engage with
mm.
other people. You would not keep your woman from talking to other women, from having connections with other women.
Of
Allow
course.
for the erotic play, and it keeps us young.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps our
And
women
so,
young to flirt with other
yeah,
men, to see the other man's attention on them. They turn a
for
bit
sure, for
girly, they
sure.
feel attractive. And I'm
Yep,
like,
yep.
there's, yes, I can give, there's nothing I can do to give her that spark that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
There's something to it.
And where's the line, because I really appreciate what you're saying of the importance of the erotic play outside of the relationship. And
Yeah,
of course, because we're human,
yeah,
there can be these emotional connections that happen. I'm
absolutely.
sure you've had women that, you do a scene with them and they're like,
Yes,
oh, my, like, you're gonna be my daddy forever. It's like, so there's emotional connections that
yeah,
sometimes are the gray areas between. I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that subject.
absolutely. And I think emotional connections can also be beautiful. I actually believe we should not separate our emotions and our heart from our erotic connection. If you do BDSM well, heart energy is oftentimes open. And
Mhm,
yes, there are times when it will create confusion. We're like, I want more of this. I want more of you. And I think,
mhm,
yes, those are challenges, but I think those are challenges where we can be honest, where we can be adults,
mhm,
where we can be clear in our boundaries and say, this is what I'm available for. And I absolutely honor that other things are happening. And that's a place for us to be truly adults together.
mm,
And I think that is, and you're still playing with fire, you're still playing with human emotions. Things are still going to be unpredictable.
mhm,
But I
mhm,
think that is still a more honest way of dealing with it than, as you referred to earlier, as so much of what I see happening under the banner of polyamory, which I think oftentimes feels really sloppy.
mm,
And people are not always honest. And oftentimes the people in those connections are constantly feeling dropped.
mm, mhm,
That
mhm,
I thought I had this person, but I actually don't.
mm,
And I think
mhm,
that is a bigger issue than saying, this is what I'm available for. Can we meet here? And if not, that's also fine.
mm, mhm,
Right?
mhm,
There might be challenges everywhere, but I think it's clearer. The boundaries can be clearer if you know, no, this is my primary bond, and this is a playful connection or an erotic connection, which is limited.
mm, mm. And, to somebody who's just coming in or, looking at, like you mentioned earlier, one taste and just how much that's been out in the media as well. And
Yeah,
so much around, both conscious sexuality, aspects of BDSM. I mean, it's starting to poke its head more into Netflix and into these places and even the field of Tantra. I feel like everything
yeah,
is Tantra meets something else these days,
yeah.
which is great. And, what are your advice or support to that couple that maybe has a strong bond that doesn't want to get lost in the kind of the eros world and then actually kind of why I've seen many marriages fall apart. Maybe they were meant to fall apart because one person was leaning too much more and the both people weren't actually fully at the seat, not the table of
Yeah.
their full fuck yes in that situation. So, and
That's
I'm sure
a
you've
that,
seen things.
that's a real challenge when the two people are not in the same place. It
Mhm,
is a
mhm,
very real challenge. It is something that comes into our field as teachers and workshop holders all the time. where one partner is there and the other partner is at home and unhappy.
Mm, mhm,
They're not in a good place that their partner is here doing this thing.
mhm,
Or the two partners have shown up, but one partner has dragged the other partner there.
mm,
They're like, I don't know why my partner needs or wants this. And it's not a
mhm,
good place
mhm,
to be in.
mm,
So, though I think those are relationship challenges. I don't think there are any easy solutions to that. I
mhm,
think if the
mhm,
two people are in a good space together, that like, hey, let's explore expanding our horizon a little bit. I think then they can be kind of adventurers together. Then I don't think even if they try something and it doesn't work out, it doesn't have to be a calamity,
mm, mhm,
right?
mhm,
And in that area, I have a advanced training right now for women who want to bring BDSM in their practitioners who want to bring BDSM in their sessions.
mhm,
They're
mhm,
already session providers.
mm,
And I think this group of practitioners, let's call them courtesans, I think are in a way deeply needed in our culture right now.
mm, mhm,
Trained
mhm,
people who can come in with clean boundaries and coach couples and
mhm,
spark their eros, teach the man a little something about handling his woman, coach the woman a little bit and how she may open up her receptivity wherever she is, could use a little coaching,
mhm,
do her
mhm,
work, and then exit.
mm, mhm,
This is
mhm,
really a great offering to have
mm,
compared to a couple just going out there and adventuring on their own
mm,
and creating some kind of a romantic situation. I think this, if you can do it deliberately and cleanly, the people in our category, people we train, people who are practitioners, can be great, provide a great service to couple them,
mhm, mm,
to come in there and help uh, ignite their eros. I do this as a Dom all the time. Couples come to
mm,
me all the time. I
mhm,
train the men. I sometimes take them into scene play.
mhm,
Sometimes the men are like, you know what? I don't want to be a Dom. I'm going to send my woman to you. You handle her. I'm
mm,
fine with that. I'll
mhm,
watch
mhm,
and learn, see what I can absorb. So if
mhm,
the two people
mhm,
can show up in that kind of open hearted space, then they can acquire mastery and have expansive, and it's a really beautiful place to end up in the afterwards.
mm,
The
mhm,
man
mhm,
feels actually more manly and strong, like I am providing this for my woman.
mm,
And
mhm,
the woman
mhm,
feels, wow, what a great life I have.
mhm,
That my
mhm,
man is okay with giving me this, and there isn't any negative impact afterwards. There isn't any punishment, any resentment, any passive aggression. He's like, no, I want you to have it,
mm, mm,
right? And I think people are very much capable of being that generous for each other. I see it in my field all the time. People who are long established couples who have been there for a while, have children, who are like, I want you to have it.
mm,
Why the hell not?
mhm, mhm,
And I think being at that stage of generosity with each other can be actually a very beautiful part of your partnership.
mm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, beautiful. The piece I'd love to kind of dive into more around that, and as it relates to man woman relating and polarity. I can feel your strong identification as a dom, and being in that role, and where for you again, both kind of personally and professionally, um is this like, where do the more vulnerability pieces come in with the feminine, with the kind of more receptivity in your own being? Because speaking to someone who both really identifies as a dom or wants to do more of that, and where does the healthy polarity dynamic come into play, in your own personal relationship, where of course you can't be a dom 24/7 all day long. There's got to be
Yep.
the places where vulnerability can be there, and you can feel like you can be held in that as well. Curious.
I'm not completely understanding the question. I don't see vulnerability as a challenge with being a dom. So I'm not
Okay.
quite sure how you're suggesting. Are you saying me being in receiving mode?
Yeah, yeah, you being more in receiving mode, and the vulnerability and the receptivity of that.
Receiving is amazing. Receiving is great. Giving is great. And I think in a dom sub dynamic or in a romantic dynamic, my best solution to it is really let's set time aside for scene play.
Hmm. Hmm.
You
And
know,
is that scene play where you're sometimes more in the sub role? Does that, like, what percentage does that
it
happen?
isn't for me personally, it isn't so much I'm in a sub role, but I can very much be in the receptive and surrendered role
Okay.
where my partner says 8 o'clock today, take a shower, be in your bathrobe, and for 2 hours you're in my hands. I'm like,
Mm,
absolutely beautiful, done.
amazing. Amazing.
Would love to receive invitations like that. And then
It's
conversely, I can tell my woman, come down in your collar and lingerie at 7 p.m. and we're doing rope and other things.
beautiful.
See the smile light up on her face. But I
Mhm.
think it is wonderful, at least in the framework I operate in, I love to separate the giving and receiving. I
Mm,
love to separate the dom and sub roles for a particular episode, for a particular scene. I think the whole model that the lovers are just supposed to come together and wonderful things are supposed to happen. I think many times that doesn't really work. It works great in the movies, but it doesn't always work.
mhm, mhm,
So I think having a little bit of more structure where one person is more in the active role and the other person is more in the receptive role, I
mhm,
think is a good model to follow quite often.
mm. And uh, what I heard you just saying is the differentiation between, like, the sub role and the state of more surrender and receiving
Yeah,
in your
yeah.
relationship. So I'd love you to speak into a little bit of that. So I think that can be, it can be some gray lines in that
To
sometimes.
me, the dom and sub are archetypes,
Hmm.
right? And it's for each of us to kind of discover which archetypes are most prominent and active in our systems,
Mm,
right? So when you're learning BDSM, you should learn to play both archetypes. If anything, you should really learn to submit first so you know what submission feels like.
mm, mhm,
And then you can kind of see where your own temperament is, where your own joy is, which energy is more in configuration with your makeup.
mm,
My system is more in resonant with the Dom archetype,
mhm, mhm,
right? But the Dom archetype is you can say it's a more active archetype because usually the Dom handles the sub, the Dom pours into the sub, the Dom takes the submissive on a ride. But I think
mm,
that's only half the journey. Even within the Dom sub dynamic, the submissive should pour back into the Dom. And in
mm,
BDSM framework, we generally refer to that as service.
mhm,
That
mhm,
the submissive is in active position, but now pouring energy into the Dom and nourishing the Dom in a way that the Dom feels nourished. Whatever that is
mm,
for that particular Dom.
mhm, mhm,
Service can take many forms. For certain people, it is going into sub mode. They switch, right? And they like going into submissive mode from time to time and having either their partner or somebody else dom them. Whatever works for you, wherever your joy is, wherever you feel really nourished and saturated and receptive, and afterwards you feel, oh my God, that was so good.
mhm, mhm,
So the whole idea of any kind of partnership is give your partner what your partner wants. Nourish your partner in a way that they find nourishing
mm,
without any idea about this is what the dynamic should look like.
mhm, mhm.
You know?
So a deeper listening underneath the surface of what actually is going to be the nourishing, service-oriented part of
Whichever
this meeting.
frequency works for your particular person,
Mhm, mhm,
right? Whichever gives them a very transported state, whichever puts them in a trance state,
mm,
whichever puts them in like feeling this is so good kind of a state,
mhm, mhm,
right? Which whatever makes them feel held, nourished, cherished, handled.
mm. Beautiful.
Yeah, give your
And
partner to learn each other's temperament and really give your partner what your partner wants. And if you don't have the temperament for it, outsource it. Really. Listen, this is happening all the time. I have many accomplished worldly men. They're like, listen, I have accomplished many things in life. What you do, I don't have the time to learn. I don't have particularly the desire to learn, but I know
mm,
my woman wants that frequency.
mhm, mhm,
Give it to her
uh-huh.
once a
And
week.
and and do you see in that dynamic that that makes their, like, relationship stronger? The fact that she's getting that from you and not getting that from him?
again, there aren't any pat answers because all relationships are complex. But overall, I can say there are many couples who are in that state where, yeah, the bigger issue, bigger thing they are doing is they're taking care of each other.
Mm, mm,
They
mhm,
are finding ways to keep each other nourished.
mm,
And I find the women also amazingly generous in this department,
mm,
right? They will hire one of my practitioners. They're like, go have a date with my man. I don't need to be there. I don't need to know what happened.
mhm, mhm.
I want to give
Exactly.
this to him just as he's giving it to me. And that's a real, this is what I'm saying. There are ways of keeping the eros, each other fed erotically without thinking. It is just supposed to happen between the two of us for 30
Mm,
years.
mhm, mhm,
I think that model is generating a lot of frustration.
mm,
Whereas
mm,
the other model is like, we know how to create a banquet of eros now for
mm,
each other and together,
mm,
which I
mm,
think is a lot more grown up and sophisticated.
mhm, mhm.
Right.
I do. I think I love that you're saying make the banquet of eros and
Yes.
let that flow. And I guess the thing I see sometimes in that banquet when it's done with a lot of clarity and consciousness. So
Yep.
where's this line between where the animal body that's been caged probably for some people for 20, 30 years, and they're like, oh my God, I'm in my banquet, and they're just getting everything. And where is that place where like essentially the dynamic communication between animal and consciousness, where animal body doesn't take over and destroy everything, but consciousness isn't keeping them so locked up behind a cage door. Like how can that banquet come out and be more in a healthy way?
I don't see people ODing on sex, right? What the place where I think we need to keep our attention to keep the house from burning down
Hmm.
is make sure we are not doing anything at the expense of our partner.
Mhm, mhm,
So this is what I mean. If the two partners are actually taking care of each other,
mm,
you are almost making sure that breakdown does not happen.
mhm, mhm,
I'm not saying you're like, I'm going out to do my thing because I'm going to go get myself satisfied.
mm,
And your partner is like, I don't know where my partner is. I don't know who they're with. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know
mm,
if I'm being abandoned here.
mhm,
I don't know if
mhm,
they're choosing somebody else over me. If all those things are active, that's not what I'm talking about.
mm, mm,
Right? Your partner can't feel you're getting your nourishment at their expense or that they're being dropped or that you're leaving them. If all those fears are there, you're back in breakdown, which,
mhm,
by the way,
mhm,
is a very common energetics in these so-called polyamorous relationships.
mm,
People are
mm,
constantly in insecurity on who is my person? Do I even have this person?
mm,
Are they
mm,
always on their way out the door because that's what it means, which I think is not a good way to do anything.
mm,
I don't think
mm,
that's a good thing. I had multiple conversations with dear friends of mine when COVID started, who the people who have been uh proponents of polyamory, and like everybody disappeared. Are these two paired up and they are bunking together where I don't have access to them, and then all of a sudden it becomes really apparent the bonds aren't there.
mhm,
There's
mhm,
nobody you can call on. There's nobody to pick up the phone to. There's nobody interested in showing up for you in the middle of the night if you get sick. It was a really
mm,
wake up call for a lot of people. Like, we may think we have multiple bonds, but in fact, we have no bonds,
mm,
which is
mm,
not a great place to be. So, I think the best way to do this kind of erotic expansion is actually to take better care of each other, not to have the other person feel they're being dropped or that
mm,
you are compromising your main bond to get your erotic nourishment. Quite the opposite. And if you do it right, then again, then it's like then you're co-conspirators,
mm,
right? Then you
mm,
can't believe how good your life is. You're like, you that happy state you see couples in, like that was fun,
mhm, mhm,
right? After a good evening, after a good night, like that was a fun night. That was a
mhm,
fun evening. Let's do that again sometime. And you're
mhm,
enjoying it together.
mm, mhm,
That's a great place to be as
mm,
partners.
mm.
And
So
that's possible.
I'm
Trust me, that's possible.
yeah, no,
It
I
is
hear
not.
that.
If you do it right, it is quite possible. If you're an adult about it, it is very, very much possible.
Hmm.
Do it with the right people. Do it with the people who understand boundaries. Do it with the people who are not there to create drama and chaos. And it's very much possible. And certainly, again, I'd be a huge advocate for people if you're just dipping your toes into this, is really work with practitioners, work with
Hmm.
professionals who know how to come in and exit.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, great. And the really the strong piece I hear throughout this conversation is like having that one strong, emotional bond with another, then actually gives a strong foundation to
Yeah,
have these other, erotic experiences,
absolutely.
but then continue to deepen with one.
Absolutely. You
Yeah.
need to be each other's person,
Yeah.
and then you can play with the rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Love that. Well, thank you. And curious from your side, what you have, what are the new exciting things coming up into this new year, into 2024, and what's
But
alive in Om's world?
Lori and I are going to be teaching our retreat in Tulum end of February,
Okay.
our Tantra meets BDSM, and then we're doing it again in Austria. Again, we did it last year, earlier this year. So if people can join us for that, that's a 6-day retreat. It's a great training in BDSM. It's great for couples
Hmm.
to learn even the basic stuff. And we really emphasize containment, and especially men giving containment to their women, which I think is a very important piece for them
Hmm.
to learn.
Beautiful.
And then I have other classes going on. A lot of them, you can just go to my website and find out what's coming up at omrupani.org.
Awesome. And when are you? I'll be teaching in Austria in May. When are you out in
In
Austria?
August. In
Okay.
August.
Cool.
Yeah, August 24th.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, I appreciate you, Om. I appreciate your presence and just the perspective and the clarity that you bring into this field. I think it's very refreshing, and stop trying to be anyone other than who you are. And I really celebrate that. Thank you.
I'm doing my best to basically give you a field report. I'm really sharing what I've seen work.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
No,
think we really need more of this in the world, because the frustration and the breakdowns in our relationship and eros is so far and wide today that I think there's a lot of pain and confusion around it.
hmm, hmm,
So I believe it or not, we are the weirdos who have something to contribute in this area.
hmm.
My
And
classes are so often filled with therapists and psychiatrists. It is
mhm,
really amusing and endearing to me. Like truly, in every class, I wouldn't be surprised if they have at least two or three, four people,
mhm, mhm,
and they come up and they talk to me, and I love to hear from them. And they will always confess, we don't have that much to offer. Couples come to us to solve their problems, and the number one problem they bring is, sex, lack of it.
mhm,
They're like,
mhm,
we have no idea. We have no training. We haven't
mhm,
explored our own eros.
mhm,
We don't really have any wisdom and insight into eros. We can help them communicate better. We can try tracking down their problems to their childhood issues. We can sometimes help them release resentments and create forgiveness. Couples therapy can be effective there. But the therapists and the psychiatrists themselves have really no real training
mhm,
in this field, because I
mhm,
think academia has completely dropped the ball on this.
mhm. I
So
agree.
believe it or
I
not,
agree.
we are the outliers here, self-studied and weirdos who are living weird lives that people may raise their eyebrows at. But then again, we have a lot of field experience on what works and what
Mhm.
doesn't work.
For sure, for sure. I just the last question for you is like, what would the world look like and expand into with a healthier dose and embodiment of eros in their personal life? Like, what do you feel like the world should step into with that?
I don't know. It's a big question. I know the biggest answer that again comes up to me is again the very PG rated one. I think if men simply learn to give good containment to their women, that would be like a leap forward. I think
Mm,
without
mm,
that, at least I know again, I talk about men, women, I think it really applies to all gender couples. Usually one person in a coupledom provides containment to the other. And if that
mhm,
basic energetic contract isn't being held, if that basic contribution is not being made, from the masculine element to the feminine element, things almost don't, there's a failure to launch.
Mm,
So I'm like, there are other steps that need to be taken. Eros is such a big and rich field to study. But I think if men don't know how to give good containment to their women, it's like nothing really gets started. They don't even earn their women's trust so that their women may surrender to them or open to them or be receptive to them.
mhm,
It's like the whole journey kind of never takes off.
mm, mm.
And that containment is needed in Eros, and it's also just needed in relationships overall.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you, brother. Thank you
My
for
pleasure.
this work you do in the world. Great to speak with you and to feel you. And
Thanks for having
yeah,
me.
glad that we're brothers on this journey of erotic life.
Would love to offer something together with you for men. I know there's so much work to be done. Be
For
great to have an
sure, for
office.
sure. Yeah, maybe we create something that would be fun
Cool.
for sure. All right,
Thank you.
take care.